Coming up on this week's GCN Racing News Show, was that the best season we've ever witnessed in pro cycling? Without a doubt, I'll be looking back at Tadej Pogačar's achievements from 2024, which have surpassed anything I thought I'd ever see in this modern era of the sport. The stats are truly mind-boggling. I'll also look back at the Simac Ladies Tour, round up all the latest transfer news, and speculate as to what is going on with Tom Pidcock and Ineos Grenadiers. This week in the world of racing, we learned that all is not well between Tom Pidcock and Ineos Grenadiers. Their star rider was withdrawn from Il Lombardia less than 24 hours before the start, and apparently wasn't given a reason as to why. More on that later on. We also learned that the 3 kilometre rule will no longer apply in UCI sanctioned road races from next season if you crash alone. This is being put in place to prevent scenarios like stage 11 of the Tour de France this year, in which Primož Roglič was given the same time as Remco Evenepoel, despite crashing basically on his own. However, I can't help but feel that the wording of the new rule basically insinuates that you are better off taking a couple of riders down with you if you do crash. And finally, we learnt that Tadej Pogačar is unbeatable. Okay, that's not quite true, but the only races he started this season that he didn't win were Milano-San Remo back in March and the Grand Prix Quebec in September. Every other race he's started, he has won. And his win in Il Lombardia on Saturday was the 25th of this season, a tally only matched this century by the sprinter Alessandro Petacchi, who did that in 2005. Now, the race on Saturday was predictable, I would say, to a large degree. Perhaps less so the composition of the early breakaway, which contained more top teams and riders than any other monument I've ever watched, which is a real sign, I think, that they all know the writing is basically on the wall. UAE, though, did a brilliant job of controlling such a strong group and bringing them all back by the time Pogačar wanted to attack. Which, as many people had predicted, was on the Colma di Silmano. Adam Yates did the early part of that climb, then Pavel Sivakov took over, and then Pogačar did his thing. We've become so accustomed to seeing him do his thing, there's literally no surprise to see Evenepoel, one of the world's best cyclists, not respond to the attack, but rather continue at his own pace, one that he knows he can sustain without blowing up. By the top of that climb, Pogačar had about a minute, and by the finish, it was over 3. And it doesn't really feel like there's much point in breaking down the race more than that, to be honest. It was the biggest winning margin at the race since 1971, 27 years before Pogačar was born, and the biggest winning margin at a monument since the 98 Paris-Roubaix. Franco Ballerini won that by over 4 minutes, about 5 months before Pogačar was born. Only Eddy Merckx has also won Liège, Lombardy and the World Championships in the same year. Only Eddy Merckx has won 2 monuments and 2 Grand Tours in the same year. Only Fausto Coppi has also won a monument 4 years in a row. Pogačar is now level with Bonen, Cancellara and Bartali with 7 monument wins, and there are only 6 riders who've won more. A reminder, he's only 26 years old. A few more stats, if you will allow me. So, he's won 11 more races this season than all 30 of Ineos Grenadiers riders combined. He's won 4 times as many World Tour races this season as Ineos Grenadiers, and more than any other World Tour team. He's won more races this season than 11 of the 18 World Tour teams. He's won twice as many Grand Tour stages this season as the second best team behind UAE, which was Alpecin-Deceuninck, and I could go on and on and on. It's not something I ever thought I'd see in my lifetime, so you sort of read and hear about the exploits of great riders of the past, but that was a different era. It wasn't supposed to be possible in this current time of greater specialism and more strength in depth in the peloton. But Pogačar has done it, and I'm pretty sure we'll never see it again unless it's Pogačar himself. Now, there will be a lot of talk as to how others can up their game ahead of next season to match or beat Pogačar, but I'm not sure there's much they can do. In fact, from what we've seen this season, it was Pogačar who had room for improvement. Maybe he wasn't doing everything perfectly professionally when others already were, and now that he is, we're seeing the true differences between them. And I have the sense that his first 2 Tour de France wins came relatively easy to him, and it was only after being beaten for a second time by Vingegaard that he really had the wake-up call that he needed to do things better. So if he continues in that same vein, the others can go back to the drawing board all they like. They're not going to be able to paint a picture that looks any less bleak. On the other hand, any of us who watch any amount of cycling or just sport over time will know how quickly things can change. There are times when great athletes or great teams come along and you feel like you're staring into the abyss when it comes to looking for someone to take over their mantle. But it does happen, and it often happens when you're least expecting it. That's not to say that Pogačar's form is suddenly going to fall off a cliff next season, or that somebody else is going to miraculously burst onto the scene and beat him, but in 2 or 3 years' time, things could look very different. And that might simply be down to Pogačar's motivation. That's the big question for me. When you've already won pretty much everything there is to win, how do you remain that motivated? Is being the best rider the world has ever seen motivation enough? Because that was his stated aim at the start of this season, wasn't it? And he has still got some way to go to be level with Merckx's career stats, even if he has just had a season that was every bit as good as Merckx's best season. Now, if anybody needs an example of how quickly things can change in pro sports, we need look no further than Ineos Grenadiers. Once the team to beat, of course, the team that looked unbeatable in the Tour de France, the biggest race in the world. Well, they are now a shadow of their former selves. Other teams have not only caught them, but surpassed them, and this year has been their worst in 15 years of existence if you look purely at win rate. And to make matters even worse, there appears to be a rather large rift between the senior management and one of the most talented and well-paid riders in their ranks, Tom Pidcock. The Olympic mountain bike champion finished second to Pogačar just 1 week before Il Lombardia, that was in the Giro dell'Emilia, but less than 24 hours before the final monument of the season, he took to Instagram to say this: "Just as things were on the up after a turbulent end to the year, I am deselected for Lombardia tomorrow. I'm in great shape and was really looking forward to it. Good luck to the boys. I guess the off-season starts early. Thanks for everyone's support, even in the tough times." Now, you will remember, if you watched last week's show or have been reading any cycling news sites recently, that the latest rumours surrounding Pidcock were that he was in negotiations with the Q36.5 team. However, rumours like those are one thing. I mean, there were a lot surrounding Evenepoel the last few years as well. But Pidcock's deselection, as he put it, is another thing altogether. Nobody outside the team knows what the finer details are, but however you look at it, it's not pretty, is it? Their DS in Italy, Zach Dempster, spoke to the press ahead of Lombardy on Saturday to say that the decision was nothing to do with the performance team and had come from senior management. Pidcock's agent, who spoke to Dan Benson, refuted rumours that the team had fired him and said he was told he was no longer going to be racing Lombardy, but wasn't told why. We've since learned that this happened on the team bus in front of the other riders when they were about to set off for the team hotel ahead of the race. So, a bit messy by all accounts, and there's no doubt there's going to be a lot more coming out of this in the coming days and weeks, so stay tuned, basically. Let me know your thoughts on it all in the comment section just down below this video. I just hope it all works out for everyone, because at the moment, I think I've said this before, it feels like Ineos aren't getting the best out of Pidcock and Pidcock's not getting the best out of Team Ineos. And my real worry is that it starts to negatively affect all the other riders and staff within that team. There are a lot of good people in that team doing the best they can to get things back on track. This, though, feels like it might derail them again, just at a point when they could draw a line in the sand at the end of this season and start rebuilding again for next year. Right, just before I move on from Lombardy, I should probably wrap up the rest of the race and some of the results. Remco Evenepoel of Soudal Quickstep surprised a few people, including myself, with his second place on the day. I mean, obviously he's incredibly talented, but he did look like he was tiring towards the end of this year. Understandably so, given how busy and successful his summer was. So second place on Saturday was about as good as it was going to get, given Pogačar's dominance. So that's a great season by him, particularly given the crash that he had back at the Basque Country in April. Giulio Ciccone also got the best result he could have hoped for in third. So along with the Ione Aguirre, who came fourth, he'd regained contact with the likes of Sivakov and Mas through some daredevil descending. That's a really good result for Lidl Trek at that race, and probably an even better one for Team Cofidis. Well done too to Sivakov as well. Sixth place after riding at the service of someone else is no mean feat. The race also marked the end of Domenico Pozzovivo's career. So the 41-year-old finished 38th on the day, 11 minutes behind Pogačar. Very respectable results at the end of what's been a 20-year pro career, so congratulations to him. Meanwhile, at the Simac Ladies Tour, there was a first pro victory for Zoe Bäckstedt. The 19-year-old from Canyon Stram won the opening individual time trial, quite comfortably as well. She successfully defended her lead on the opening road stage, but things were made significantly harder for her on day 3, as she had no teammates left. All of them had either abandoned the race through sickness or through crashes. And it was quite a bizarre sight, seeing her sign on alone each day on the podium. Now, up against the might of Team SD Works Pro Time, Bäckstedt had it all to do, but she defended admirably. Lorena Vives won stages 2 and 3, but having finished so far down in that opening time trial, she was still some way off Bäckstedt, who'd made all the front splits on those days. And it wasn't until stage 4 that Bäckstedt lost the yellow jersey, and even then, it wasn't to an SD Works rider. They did win the stage again with Rachele Barbieri, but it was Francisca Koch of Team DSM who was the best place from the winning breakaway, and she took over the race lead. Vives was back to winning her third stage on the day after, but SD Works still weren't leading the race overall, which put them in a bit of a predicament. They may have won 4 of the 5 stages up to that point, but Vives was still too far down on GC to conceivably win the overall. And so, their attention turned to the world champion Lotte Kopecky, despite a very nasty crash at the end of stage 5. She'd been on lead-out duty for much of the week for Vives, but starting the final day, just 8 seconds behind Koch, she was best placed to win the race overall for them. And that's exactly what they set out to do. Vives went from sprinter to lead-out rider, Kopecky vice versa, and it worked out perfectly for them. It was close, because Silke Smolders was only just caught before the line, but Kopecky won the stage and the GC, and SD Works won 5 of the 6 stages. Not a bad way to finish your season off, eh? Koch held on for second place, one of the best results of her career, and Bäckstedt took a very creditable third. She'll shortly be turning her attention to cyclocross, I'm sure, but that is a real step up in her pro road career. The race also marked the final competitive outings in the careers of Christine Majerus, Alice Barnes and Audrey Cordon-Ragot. Congratulations to all 3 of you on everything you've done within the sport, and all the best for whatever comes next. At the Grand Piemonte, midway through last week, Nilsson Powers of EF Education Easy Post attacked with about 40 k's to go and averaged 49.5 k's an hour from there to the finish to take his first victory in over a year. The American was actually a last-minute call-up to that race, which must have made the win feel even more special. He had also been competing the previous day at Trevally Varazini, but that race was annulled midway through due to torrential rain and flooding. And finally, at the Coppa Bernocchi, Stan van Tricht took the first win of his career, getting the better of Alex Baudin and Roger Adria in the small group sprint to the line. If you missed any of those races, you can catch up on them by subscribing to Discovery Plus or Max, where you'll be able to watch a full season of bike racing, whether that's road, track, mountain bike or cyclocross, and you can do so live or on demand. Just before I move on to transfers, a quick note to say that Stefan Kung and Grace Brown won the Chrono de Nation time trials yesterday. For Kung, it wraps up a successful season, but for Brown, it wraps up a very successful season and career. That marked her final competitive outing as a pro cyclist, and she did so as the reigning world, Olympic and national time trial champion. Doesn't get much better than that, does it? Congratulations to Grace. On to the transfer news now, and it's been yet another big week. I'll start with Cecily Uttrup Ludwig, who after 5 years with FDJ Suez will link up with Tour de France winner Kasia Niewiadoma at Canyon Stram. The Dane has inked a 2-year deal with the squad. 18-year-old Pablo Torres has signed a 6-year deal, though, with UAE Team Emirates. Some of you will remember that he broke the climbing record up the Colle della Finestre en route to second overall at the Tour de l'Avenir back in August. Torres is yet another young super talent signed up on a very long-term deal, and once again, it's UAE who've got his signature. Kasper Asgreen will leave Soudal Quick-Step after 7 very successful years with that Belgian squad. So the 2021 Tour of Flanders winner will be with EF Education Easy Post from next season. Gianni Moscon is also leaving Soudal Quick-Step apparently, and rumoured to be moving to Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe. Eleanor Bagstedt is set to leave Lidl Trek to join UAE team ADQ on a 3-year deal, whilst Rune Herregot will move to UAE from Intermarché Wanty Gobert. Talita de Jong moves back into the World Tour in 2025, leaving Lotto Destiny to join Human Powered Health, whilst recent winner of the Tour de l'Avenir, Marion Bunel, has signed for Visma Lease Bike. There's also been a couple of movers in the background staff as well. Luke Rowe, who's been with Ineos and Team Sky for his entire pro career, is going to become a director sportif next year at Decathlon AG2R. Rowe suffered a concussion in the Spring Classics back in March and was forced to bring his riding career to an end slightly sooner than planned. And finally, Lars Bohm moves from SD Works to FDJ Suez, a move we're also expecting Demi Vollering to make, although that, as yet, is unconfirmed. One actually that I forgot, Alexander Camp moving from Tudor Pro Cycling over to Intermarché next season. Right, thank you as ever for watching. I'll be back with you again this time next week, so I'll see you then.